All right, it's the flip side to last week. We are the champions. Might be almost as long as we will rock you, but not quite. That's next on Crown Jewels, PLD Projects, Crown Jewels. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to PLD Projects, Crown Jewels. I'm your host. This, of course, is the podcast where I take you through every song in the Queen catalog, chronologically speaking, including solo material. We go through one by one. We listen to all the versions of the songs, figure out which version is the best version of the song or the crown jewel version of the song. Also give you some notes, some quotes. We see if it lands into my top 10 Queen songs or Queen related songs of all time. A lot of fun, but these last 2 weeks have been definitely extensive. These are the songs that have a lot of different versions to listen to. We'll Rock You last week, our longest podcast of all time, at least in this era. I do believe that We're the Champions will not be too far behind before you get into more manageable things again next week. This version, let's go through them. What do we have to listen to today? The studio version, Tops of the Pops version, Room by Rick Rubin version, a Gulf War version, the Raw Sessions version, backing track mix, 5 versions of Queen and Robbie Williams. Yes, Queen and Robbie Williams got together and re-recorded this in the 2000s. We have the 8 versions of Freddie Mercury era live. We got Freddie Mercury tribute concert with Liza Minnelli. Yes, Liza and cast. We got the Party at the Palace in 2002 with Will Young, a Pop Idol's Will Young. We got Amsterdam in 2002 with Trinche. We got 46664 concert with Anastasia and cast. We have the Queen and Paul Rogers era, about 8 versions of them. We got 2 versions from the Queen and Adam Lambert era. We got a couple of other alternative ones. Pavarotti and Friends in 2003 with Zucchero. MTV Russian Awards with Zemfira. The American Idol, where Queen and Adam Lambert first met and first performed live together with Adam Lambert and other finalists, and eventually the winner, Chris Allen. And finally, we have the Proms in the Park version, which is Brian May and Carrie Ellis. Actually, a very interesting collaboration version there. So that's a lot to get to. So without further ado, let's just get right to it. Now, when I say listen to it, I don't want to get flagged on anything on YouTube. So what I do is if you look into the description below in the show notes, I'll give you a link to a Google Doc, which will have links to all the YouTube versions that I have of the different versions we're going to listen to. So what we're going to do is I'm going to talk to you a little bit about it. At a certain point, I'll tell you to pause, click on the specific link, listen to it, and come back and listen to me explain a little bit about it, talk a little bit about it. That's how we run things here. All right, let's start off with a little notes and quotes written by Freddie Mercury. Features Freddie on lead and backing vocals and piano, Brian May on guitar, John Deacon on bass guitar, and Roger Taylor on drums. That's right. Studio version, despite all the live versions you might have seen on the YouTubes, it does not have any backing vocals from Brian and Roger. The vocals are all completely Freddie Mercury in the studio version of We're the Champions. It's a very interesting fact. Sometimes the band does that. It kind of tricks you sometimes. You only think about it because when they do sing together, even in the studio, they kind of blend together so well. Sometimes you hear the Queen harmonies and you figure it's got to be the 3 of them again. This time, though, it is. I am 99% sure it's just Freddie on the vocals. Live version is a completely different story. But all right, it's a little known fact, honestly, but this was actually the single in the UK, not We'll Rock You. Maybe a little known fact in the US, I should say. It hit number 2 in the UK, and with We'll Rock You as a double A side, it hit number 4 in the US. It was reissued as a single in 1992 in the US and climbed back up to number 52. Also, first time around, went to number 11 to Australia, number 12 in Austria, number 2 in the Dutch charts, number 13 in Germany, 3 in Ireland, 6 in Norway, number 14 in Sweden. Now, this was Freddie's version, answer, if you will, to Brian's We'll Rock You. They both kind of wanted to write a song as far as involving the audience, letting them get involved with participation. Brian went with the simplistic. Freddie went with the big sing-along type chorus, which was a big hit for them, considering that in 2011, a team of scientists actually determined that We're the Champions is the catchiest song of all time. I don't know who comes up with these tests or how they really test it. There was an article on the Daily Mail about it, and supposedly, scientifically speaking, We're the Champions, the catchiest song of all time. As far as playing it live, they tried it out a few times in the last song before the encore, and they close out different things, but soon after really slipped into being the final Queen song of the concert and has remained there ever since. Through Freddie, through Paul Rodgers, through Adam Lambert, through even a lot of festival appearances, pretty much this is going to be the last song you hear outside of the taped God Save the Queen that plays them off as they leave the stage. A few quotes. I got about 4 quotes here, 2 from Freddie, 2 from Brian. Freddie told Circus in 1978, I was thinking about football when I wrote it. I wanted a participation song, something the fans could latch onto. It was aimed for the masses. I thought we'd see how they took it. It worked a treat. When we performed it at a private concert in London, the fans actually broke into a football chant between numbers. Of course, I've given it more theatrical subtlety than an ordinary football chant. You know me. He continued on, telling Circus, I certainly wasn't thinking of the press when I wrote it. I never think about the British music press these days. I suppose it could also be construed as my version of I Did It My Way. We've made it, and it certainly wasn't easy. No bed of roses, as the song says, and it's still not easy. And that is true. The British music press was notorious for being anti-Queen. They definitely clashed over the years, and the press really kind of pushed this song as a way that they were saying the band was arrogant and saying they were over the top. And it kind of actually really misconstrued what they were trying to do with the song, as Brian would say later on. As part of an interview again with Circus, he says, Brian says, songs aren't always about what the words say. Messages in a song can appear different. I always see that as a difference between prose and poetry. Prose can mean exactly what it says, while poetry can mean the opposite. That goes for this song. Freddie's stuff is often tongue-in-cheek anyway, as you know. This song is very theatrical. Freddie is very close to his art. You could say he's married to his music, whether it's I Did It My Way or his There's No Business Like Show Business. I must say, when he first played it for us in the studio, we all fell on the floor with laughter. So many of the people in the press hate us because we've sidestepped them and got where we have without them. But there's no way the song says anything against our audiences. And when the song says we, it means us and the fans. When we did that special concert, the fans were wonderful. They understood it so well. I know it sounds corny, but it brought tears to our eyes. Reflecting on the track, and back in 1993, Brian did an interview with Guitar for the Practicing Musician. Interesting anecdote about specifically the end. He says, with Freddie, I always felt there was something in the way of electricity happening, and there are some moments which are on tape, which I'm proud of. They're not the great virtuoso moments. For instance, when we were the Champions, I had done the guitar for that fairly early on. Everyone said, that's fine. Normally, the person who wrote the song did the mix, which was the case in this instance. Freddie was mixing the thing. I took a cassette tape home of it halfway through, and they were going to finish it off in the morning. I thought the guitar just didn't make it. It seemed weak in comparison to the way the song had evolved. So I said, look, Fred, I have to get back and do that. I redid everything. There's a little piece towards the end when I was trying to make the guitar sing along with Freddie's vocals. He was really pushing himself in the vocals at the end, so I tried to push the guitar, express the way that I felt. It's hardly audible on the record. It's not like a major feature, but you can hear the guitar and the vocal are kind of straining against each other. That's the sort of thing which I like to listen to now. It's a nice moment which is captured. Oh, there you go. I've talked a lot. Let's listen to the album version. I know you've heard it a million times. Listen to it with open ears. Try to see what you can hear. Again, it's in that Google Sheet, which is linked below in the show notes. And then come back and we will talk about it.
I've paid my dues time after time.
All right, there you have it. That's the studio version from News of the World. And not a whole lot I can say that hasn't been said. This is one of those well-known songs. This podcast tends to shine more on the deeper cuts when you might have not have heard the song. Casual fans who might not have listened to these songs very much. This song is hard to avoid. It's been in the lexicon for quite a while. I will say one of the things I always notice about this track is John Deacon's bass. It's so tasty. Freddie has that intro, which is a very typical Freddie chord progression. But that bass that John plays, it never stays still, but it also doesn't overwhelm anything. It just becomes just like tasty movement. It bounces a little bit around, going from upper register down to the lower register, adds like a second alternative melody to the whole thing. It's such a great texture that John, I wish John got more credit than he does. He seems he's very underrated, especially for moments like this. I really like that. The full band comes in for the first chorus. Interesting enough, though, when the first part of the chorus, the We Are the Champions part, is Freddie's solo vocally, no backing rounds or at all, it's just all the lead vocal. And then afterward, it comes up the second part of We Are the Champions. That's when you get the multi-layered Freddie playing on to the back. The album, or the song rather, has an interesting melody line as part of that catchiness. That na 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 has a very catchy feel to it, and you kind of easily sing it in your head. All right, the second verse does add a little bit more Brian wandering guitar. I used to call it wandering guitar. Basically, it means that he's not playing anything specifically like with the chords or as far as the melody line. He kind of adds a little bit of texture to it, adds a little bit of noodling, as it were. Not in the sense of like fast noodling. It's just kind of like you playing around, but it adds a little bit more of that kind of extra layer, which is nice. Uh, it kind of really squeals into the second chorus. That would add some nice licks to the second chorus. The third chorus adds a nice piano riffing at the end. Dun, 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 dun. Background Freddie doing that rhythmic piano playing. Again, just it's always what the band does. They like to do things differently throughout the song. Instead of playing the chorus the exact same way, they add a little something texture-wise. They drop something out to make it a different feel, so you don't really get bored listening to them. There's always something new going on. And of course, very interestingly enough, this is kind of a Mandela effect, I think. It does end without resolving. We are the champions because we are the champions. Bum bum. And there's no of the world. Now, the live versions, they do end it with the of the world, which makes sense. It's a big dramatic finish to a concert, let alone a song. But as far as that goes with the studio album, without ending it without that resolve, it kind of feels like you're left hanging. You're left at a cliffhanger. But some people will swear that they heard it before. But yeah, I appreciate it though. It's not the only time they do this. We'll get into a song later on, much later on, which does this type of ending again. I kind of like it, kind of dig it. So, all right, let's move on now to the next version. This will be the Top of the Pops version. Check out that Google sheet, click on it, and come back for more. Pause now. And we'll keep on fighting. Now, as they do with Top of the Pops and BBC sometimes as well, it feels like the band used the basic backing track to be the same, although it looks like Brian got a chance to record some more guitar to it. It's a little louder. It's definitely an alternate guitar licks in the final chorus, which are cool as a curio. I'm not sure I would make it as a best version of it. The thing I dislike about it is they add crowd clapping during the second chorus, and that kind of continues on towards the end. But it feels kind of faulty. It feels like it was added on just for the hell of it. I mean, I think the band did play a live version of it at the time, and that's where it was initially recorded from. But it kind of feels disingenuous to me a little bit, a little fake to me, to have like a studio sounding thing with the clapping and whatever. So that's one thing I dislike. But your miles may vary. Maybe you'll like the version of it. So, all right, that's it for the Top of the Pops. Let's go on to the next version, written by Rick Rubin. You remember that Rick Rubin did the We Will Rock You remix, a bunch of them for We Will Rock You. We did that last week. He did get his mitts on We Are the Champions one time. He does one We Are the Champions remix. We're going to listen to that now. And like I said, it's in that Google sheet. Click on it and come back for more after you're done. And there it is there, the Rick Rubin version. We'll Rock You is much better for this type of remix because they do it the same style. They take a sample from James Brown's Funky Drummer. And why would you do that with We Are the Champions? It kind of works with We'll Rock You. I understand what they're going for We Will Rock You. With the Champion, they just do it at some point and they drop it out and let the album version play, maybe a little bit of a different drumming in the background. It just feels kind of weird to me. I'm not a big fan of this version at all. I guess it's nice to hear once. Kind of, you're always curious to hear what a remix sounds like once. But they should have stuck with We'll Rock You, even though I even love a lot of We'll Rock You, to be honest with you. Rick Rubin, he did actually ruin it a little bit for me on this one. He's a great producer throughout his career. It's fine. It's whatever it is. But definitely, if I'm going to choose one, I'm going to listen to We'll Rock You again more than We Are the Champions. So, all right, next up, it's the Gulf War version. This is one I'm going to tell you right away. Spoiler alert, I don't listen to this one hardly ever. All it is the album version. And it's got speeches from George Bush after the Gulf War to open it and then interspersed throughout. Go ahead, listen to it. We'll come back. We'll talk a little bit more about it. I've done my sentence.
Saddam Hussein was the villain,
but committed no crime.
And there you go there. Basically, what happened was after the Gulf War ended, they declared that we were the winner. They declared we were the winner. Hollywood Records put together this little mix, sent it over free to the servicemen and women who were over across the pond helping out in the Gulf War. I'm not sure if they appreciated it or not. I know that I don't want to listen to it. I don't need to hear George Bush claiming how much we beat Saddam Hussein. It just it just doesn't fit right with anything. To be completely honest, there's nothing about this I like. I like the music's the same music, same album version, but I don't want to hear George Bush over it. So yeah, that's where we go there. It does have the military serviceman saying it's great to be back. I kind of appreciate that at the end. So that does that's the cockles of my heart for a short second, but otherwise it's going to be a pass for me. So let's get on to something good. Let's move on to something good. This is next is the alternative version from the Raw Sessions disc from the anniversary box set from News of the World. Alternate take here. It's on as a Raw Sessions. Click in the Google Doc, find it, hit that YouTube link, listen to it, and come back and I'll talk about it.
1, 2, 3.
Much better. What a palate cleanser that was. This is something that happened in a lot of the album, or a lot of this disc, rather. They put together a few tracks with some studio chatter, kind of making you feel like you're in the room with them as they record it. That works as part of the idea. I kind of wish they had a sessions disc, which was part studio chatter, part without. So like they actually really do enjoy this mix without. It does feel like this is a touch slower than what we ended up with. That might be just me. That might be me after hearing the Ruben drum remix version. I'm not sure. Interesting alternate take. So Freddie using that bit of falsetto in the chorus. Keep on fighting. Really he touches that falsetto moment during the second part. It's really kind of cool vocal moment. His vocals are great. They're clear. They're very much album worthy at this point, I think. I feel like this version was more the Brian May version, if you were. I kind of feel like Brian tried to add more guitar to everything. That's always been his case. Shockingly, he's a guitarist. What is he going to do? But if you listen to it, some additional guitar flourishes throughout the second verse, while the bass actually seems much more low key. I don't know if it's trying to compete with Brian's guitar, which makes it difficult. I do feel like maybe we were better off with just the bass, especially in the beginning. But I do like a lot of the additional licks he puts on. It seems like the more the mix goes on too, we get more Brian. Interestingly, arrangement-wise, which is something that will come back after the quote-unquote like final chorus, like where it would end on the album, we get yet another chorus and Brian squealing a lot more. And then after more of that chorus, we get yet another chorus background without Freddie singing anything. But instead of Freddie singing anything, we get a little bit of a guitar solo from Brian. The backing vocals do come in as they normally would, and then it ends with this nice little piano trill and some studio chatter. It's a very cool version to listen to. I'm glad I got to hear it. I'm hoping beyond hope that Queen will release more extended versions or expanded versions of their albums with stuff like this. Even if there's not a lot of like alternate material as far as demos or different songs, I mean, unreleased songs, I'd still like to hear different takes. Hearing alternate takes is exciting to me. Get to hear Freddie, Brian, Roger, and John doing something different that we haven't heard before, even if it's not quote unquote as good. There's reasons why they would decide to release things the way they do. But at this point, I'd love to hear more. I eat this stuff up. So that'll be the Raw Sessions version. Let's now listen to the backing track mix. Well, I can't let you listen to it, unfortunately. I realized this afterwards because we didn't have a YouTube version to click onto, which is surprising because usually Queen had this from the News of the World. This came also from the News of the World sessions and that album that the expanded edition as they were. But I also didn't really feel like I needed to track it down too much. Never going to be a crown jewel. I almost never put the backing track too high up in the crown jewels. Because if I'm going to listen to the best version of a song, I want a full version of the song, or at least a complete vocal album take. So it just seems like this is good for being a curio, but not much more. The only thing different, really, it does help you hear the piano a bit more clearly, especially during the final chorus. But beyond that, there's not a whole lot to really talk about. You've heard it all before with the regular version. So, all right, we'll skip listen to that. There's no YouTube version there. Next up, we're going to listen to the Coyne and Robbie Williams version. There are 4 YouTube links. I'm sorry. There are 2 YouTube links that I found that we can listen to. I'm going to talk about 5 versions, 4 of which were released, 1 which was not released. But we'll start out with the soundtrack version and then the video version. And then we'll come back and we'll talk about all 5. Stay tuned. All right, back for more, are you? Thanks for sticking around. So the movie A Knight's Tale came out in 2001. Around this time, obviously, Queen had done the Freddie Mercury tribute concert in 1992. They released Made in Heaven, the final quote-unquote Queen album with Freddie's unreleased tracks. They recorded No One But You a few years after that, and they worked on the musical a little bit after that. At this point, Brian and Roger kind of felt like they were stirring a little bit. They both had done two solo albums since Freddie had passed. They had both done two solo tours since Freddie had passed, and kind of felt like enough time had started to pass, and maybe they were going to kind of try to explore working together again. What that meant, how that meant was something they were both open to. They weren't really, looking for anything per se. More like, let's just hang out and see what we can come up with, and do projects as they come along. There was a rumor at one point that Queen and Robbie Williams would tour. They definitely worked together a little bit, and this was part of that work, and what the only recordings we've ever got from them as far as that goes. Robbie Williams, of course, being from Take That in the UK, a big boy band and a big solo star in his own right. A solo star in the UK, we never really translated to American sales. He released a couple albums here in the US, never to the same extent. He is a huge star in the UK, not so much in America. He's a good singer. He definitely had some public antics, which were, kind of holding him back. In fact, that is partially, I think, what happened with Queen. I think they were thinking about it, but Queen decided they couldn't trust him as much. I don't know if that's the right word, trust him. They weren't quite ready to enter into a committed relationship with anybody, with someone like Robbie Williams, who had his own issues, his own agenda, and his own solo career to really deal with. This didn't seem like the perfect fit for them, but they did like Robbie. They knew that Robbie was a big fan of Queen, and they became friends with Robbie. But despite the non-touring, they did get together to cover "We Are the Champions" for A Knight's Tale, the film. It is, and that was something kind of cool, I think. Don't ask John Deacon, who did not participate. I don't want to spend too much time on this. There is a quote, which I won't actually say the exact quote, but John was kind of cornered by a member of the press. And I believe John either had been maybe potentially had a few drinks and was not actually aware he was talking to a press member, but he didn't have very nice things to say about Robbie and about this version particularly. So we'll leave that as it were. I do think this is worth a listen overall. I want to listen to the soundtrack version, which is the basis for everything else. Has a nice kind of cool spacey keyboard intro with strings in the background. I'm not sure who's playing bass, but they are trying to ape John, but they're not nearly as tasty as John is. They're not quite as accomplished. It might be Brian on bass. It might be Roger on bass. It might be a different studio bassist thing. I don't have the credits for that, unfortunately. The recording is very crisp. The pre-chorus is really crisp. The backing vocals are strong by Brian and Roger. This track, you do get Brian and Roger singing background vocals as if it were a live concert. Robbie has a decent voice, no doubt about it. It works well enough. He's definitely no Freddie. He's definitely no pop, sensational pop star, but he's got a good, solid voice that does cross over a little bit into rock and roll. So that lends him a little more credence to sing Queen. After the third chorus, which becomes a little bit more bare bones at one point, instead of ending, we kind of get that Raw Sessions version brought back. We get another chorus, and we end with a Brian solo, which is really the biggest reason to listen to this version. Brian has an additional guitar solo. It's a great arrangement. And the end chorus happens again with an end guitar. Again, no resolution. They go with the no end resolution version of the song. So, all right, what else we have? The different versions here. The main mix, which I could not find a YouTube version for, not a whole lot different. Mainly the string and orchestral section that's in the background is a little bit more prominent. And the ending does not fade out like the soundtrack version. It's much more of a definitive ending, not with the Of the World, but as far as musicality goes. Strings are very, very high, though. A lot more higher in the mix. And I actually think they do the song justice, considering we are trying to do something a little bit different with this cover. The next part of the version, the video version, this is what you saw in the video version. Basically, it's the same as the soundtrack. It does have the main mix ending with the not fading out, the more definitive ending. Song-wise, though, that's really the only thing that's different. There's some stuff in the beginning. Robbie is getting chanted his name. Robbie has some quotes randomly in the middle. They basically filmed this as if Robbie Williams was in A Knight's Tale, or at least in a medieval time period. He does a concert type performance of the song. Brian and Roger are not involved in the video visuals at all. It's fine. It's okay, but it's my least. I wouldn't listen to it. Why listen to it for crowd noise and occasional Robbie Williams dialogue, which has nothing to do with the song? So I'd much rather go back to the main mix or the soundtrack version. Two other versions I had, which I did not have YouTube links for, the rock radio mix, which was released. I actually have never heard the rock radio mix. It's kind of it's an unknown treasure somewhere. Some Queen fan has found it and played it to a few people. From what I've heard about it, and I'm not going to rank it. It's not going to be in my ratings at all because I can't rank it without listening to it. But from what I hear, it's basically the same version, just without the strings and orchestral sounds. So basically, just cut them out of the mix entirely, making it much more a straightforward rock and roll cover, which to me feels less important or less something really impressive. I'd rather hear something a little bit different. Take a swing. Speaking of taking a swing, the last one we'll talk about with regards to Robbie Williams is called The Original Idea. Now, this is not confirmed. This was a rumor. But according to according to the speculation and things talked about at that time, Queen and Robbie originally presented an idea to the recording company, which involved acoustic guitar. It was supposed to be quite a departure from the original. It was going to be big time departure in a different kind of fashion. I don't know how much more, except for the fact that an acoustic guitar was featured. Beyond that, who knows? The record company actually rejected it for being too different from the classic version. They didn't want to waste time with that. They wanted something that was at least recognizable and close to the original version. I would love to have heard it. I like the main mix. I like what we got. But I would love to have heard some kind of weird, different take from Queen and Robbie. But unfortunately, was not to be. All right. That ends the studio versions. Now we're going to get into the live versions. We'll start first with the 8 different live versions that are from the Freddie era. We got Live Killers, Rock Montreal, On Fire at the Bowl, Live Aid, Live Magic, Live at Wembley, 2 versions. And we got the Hungarian Rhapsody, and that'll do it. That'll do it for those. So click on those links, listen to them. If you want to listen to all of them, hey, it's up to you. I'd at least listen to Rock Montreal, or maybe On Fire at the Bowl. But feel free to do as you will, or you can just stay here and listen to me talk about it. I'll take a break, though, and I'll be back in a moment. All right, when you listen to 8 versions, they kind of definitely tend to flow together. So I can't really break down too many differences, big time differences. So I'll give you an overall mini ranking of what I like, my least favorite Freddie version to my favorite Freddie version before we move on. I'll make some comments on all of them. My least favorite version is definitely the Live Magic version, notably only really for being taken from Nebworth, the final Freddie Queen concert, as I mentioned. But unfortunately, like most of Live Magic, edited down. And it's not edited down by the band as far as like this is not how they did it live. Live, they did the full song. But for the album, they just cut it for the first verse and the 2 choruses. They've actually performed it that way in festivals. But I feel like there's something, I guess this may be petty of me, but like if the band does it that way, that's fine. But if they didn't do that this way, I hate having it edited down for the album. So I listen to that very little, only when I'm in a Nebworth mood to hear that final, like emotional Freddie doing his final song with the band live. So again, it's not a crown jewel just because it's edited down, but it's definitely worth to listen to. Next up from that is Live Killers. Live Killers, I take some of this information again from queenlive.ca. My friend Bob Wagner does a great site there for the Freddie era live version. He does a great analysis on Queen Live Killers. He says this version is most likely from Paris, 1979. But unfortunately, the band didn't deem it well enough to release, so they added overdubs on it, and I don't like that. I don't like when bands add overdubs, and Queen does add overdubs on their live albums at times. They're such perfectionists. They hate letting things go out without a little bit of fixing here and there. Some people think that's cheating, and I kind of actually agree with them a little bit, to be honest with you. I don't like it as much. I don't like decry them and say I can't listen to their live albums. I love listening to their live albums still overall, but Live Killer specifically has the ones that I can hear very poignantly, especially strengthening the vocals. It's still a good version of the track, but I feel like others are less overdubbed. I could be wrong. I'm not that good listening to audio wise, but when it was pointed out to me, I understood where it was coming from. And overall, that makes me want to listen to it less than the other versions. I'd rather hear something else if it's going to be a little faulty. So there we go. That's where we go there. From there, Live Aid. Live Aid is very good. I will say that Live Aid is very good. At least actually just unfortunately compared to the rest of the other Live Aid tracks, this is the full version of the song. It does feature a very prominent John in the mix. John in the live version has tended to get, I don't know, shall we say, pushed down the mix a little bit compared to the vocals and some of the guitar work. You can hear him pretty well in this. Freddie goes for it a bit more. He has one little minor crack in there. partially because he wasn't supposed to be singing at all. It's a great moment. I just feel like there's different versions which are better overall, at least versions of the song. Overall, the Live Aid performance is probably one of the best performances of all time. Individual tracks might be different compared to others, but it's not a bad version. But I listened to a few different versions before I listened to Live Aid. Which one of them would be Live at Wembley Day 1. This came released much later on from the Live at Wembley album. This was released in the DVD. They actually released the Friday concert as well as a Saturday concert. And this is a very fine one. It's got a nice Freddie vocal during the first section, but then kind of takes it down in the last verse. He kind of doesn't take too many risks with it in the second part of the song. And the guitar feels like it's really down in the mix compared to some of the other versions. It's a fine version. It's an okay version, but again, they're higher up on the list that I'd rather listen to. Speaking of that, Hungarian Rhapsody. Hungarian Rhapsody is the next up, from Budapest in 1986. Mix feels a little muted to me. It's a crisp sound, but it feels a little bit compressed. So I don't love listening to it. I don't feel like it's as loud and arena shaking as it should be. The lines are nicely delivered, some kind of a different extrapolations from Freddie overall, but it feels like kind of like middle of the pack. Like I've heard better versions, I've heard worse versions, but so that's why I go with that. We got top 3 from the rest of them. On Fire at the Bowl. I really do like this one. There's this kind of like hesitant intro where he starts playing the intro of the song, stops, and then kind of keeps going. The crowd is on fire, literally. I had no pun intended from being on Fire at the Bowl. Milton Keynes, 1982. Freddie's a little more playful, a couple of on and ons, especially when he goes into the on and on and on moments before the chorus. But I feel like he's not quite as on par vocally here as he was with the two higher versions. So I like it. I like it quite a bit. But it's not Montreal, which is the next one. In Montreal, very crisp mix. I do like this one. The audience is always muted in the Montreal concert, Montreal 1981. You tell that throughout the Blu-rays and everything else, which I wish they hadn't muted it so much because it kind of almost feels like it's a dead air space at this point. I'd like to hear the energy of the crowd. But Freddie has a great voice during this entire gig. This is the one that I picked from Somebody to Love. Somebody to Love version from this concert. Really well done. Again, he hits it very well. I should have talked about this earlier on in this particular segment, but Freddie does a lot of the song, and then during choruses, he usually took it down a little bit and let Roger to do the higher parts of the harmonies. It works very well, especially when he he challenges himself more in the verses at times. But the chorus makes for bigger ultimate sound between him, Brian, and Roger. Of course, Roger just does the higher parts all the time. That's what he does. The bass also still isn't quite as prominent, but it does. I should have said this before. I think I mentioned it. Yeah, I did. It does resolve with the end of the world, with the of the world at the end. The live version intended to do that. So, all right. Finally, my favorite version. I think very tough now. They're all kind of blend together. But I think if I had to pick one out of these Freddie live versions, I'd go with Live at Wembley Day 2. It's the originally from Live at Wembley 1986, one of the first live albums I ever had. Very impassioned vocal during this one. I Never Lose sounds really like kind of committed and growly. Like he's really emotional and into it. And I really did like in some of the line readings, which were a little bit different. Until the end, added a few different flowery textures to it. The mix is a lot better, I feel, than the one on Friday. The guitar feels a little bit better. It's a great vocal. It's a great vocal overall. It kind of feels like it builds and builds and builds to a climactic ending. So, yep, that's what we're gonna have. That's what we're gonna say. Live at Wembley, Day 2, the Saturday concert. My favorite of the officially released Freddie versions. All right, let's listen to the Freddie Mercury tribute concert next with Liza Minnelli.
Ladies and gentlemen, Liza!
This one's kind of confusing to me a little bit in terms of how much I like it and how much I don't like it. The moment and where it comes from is really the big deal here. The Freddie Mercury tribute concert of 1992, we lost Freddie in November of 1991. This was very raw, and the crowd is magnetic. They're explosive. They love it. They're trying to give tribute to Freddie themselves. It makes for a very touching, powerful, climactic finale. On the other hand, the performance is fine. I understand why Liza Minnelli is there. A lot of people didn't get that. Liza Minnelli was one of Freddie Mercury's favorite singers. She really appreciated him as well. But it does make for interesting curious type performance. She's doing like a Frank Sinatra, or I should say Liza Minnelli style over the rock song, which makes for an interesting marriage to a degree. She warbles through like the show tune, basically. But then the full cast comes in and it makes us kind of like magic moments here and there. I do like the performance. It's fine. It's fine. It's a fun ending. It's a fun ending. So it's definitely worth watching, if nothing else, because it's the end of the Freddie Mercury tribute concert and they put on a show. So, all right. Next up will be Party at the Palace from 2002 with a pop idol, not an American Idol, a pop idol.
Time after time.
All right, Party at the Palace 2002, Buckingham Palace. Queen performed a part of the gig. This is the one where Brian opened up on top of Buckingham Palace with his guitar playing God Save for the Queen. During Queen's set, they did a couple of Queen songs. They ended it, of course, with We Are the Champions. They added it on with Will Young, who you may not know of him in America. He was the first winner of Pop Idol in the UK, which is basically American Idol for the UK. And he also gets the help from the backing vocal talent from the We'll Rock You cast. It's fine. His voice is fine, but he's definitely overwhelmed by the band. I feel like he's overpowered by the band. He does not have a rock voice. It's a pop voice. And he doesn't do anything too interesting with the song. He tries occasionally, but it just comes off kind of like, okay, next, yeah, okay. The arrangement is nice. There's a nice dramatic ending to it. But overall, Will Young, not my favorite version. I know I might have much more to say about that. Yeah, keep that one away. If you're watching the Part of the Palace, you don't have to skip it, but you'll understand. All right, next up, we got Queen and Queen's Day in Amsterdam in 2002 with a Dutch singer, Trench Day. I hope I'm saying that right. I have no idea. All right, during that time where Brian and Roger were kind of feeling their way out, they'd done stuff with Robbie Williams. They had done Party at the Palace. This was kind of one of the gigs. Actually, they did Party at the Palace after this, I should say. But this was one of those gigs where really there's no real reason for it. I mean, it was to celebrate the Dutch Queen, but like Queen had done some charity gigs and some festival gigs, but this kind of felt like a random one-off concert for the band. Had a lot of guest stars, and as you come to find out, they do like as Mick Foley from the WWE would say, cheap pop, the cheap heat. Cheap pop, they would basically go for a local singer or superstar from the area, from the country, to sing with them. In this case, Trinche Oosterhuis was a singer was a Dutch singer who had a long career. She had a band at one point. I don't remember the name of the band. I think it was No Order, maybe. I'm not sure. I could be wrong on that. But she sings to the end, and I gotta say, it's another fine performance. I think she's better than Will Young. Interesting notes. I'd say she sounds more like Liza than she does Queen. She definitely has a show bit to it, but it might be more of a pop sensational kind of thing. Versus seems slow. The mix is really all over the place. That's one of the worst things about the Amsterdam concert. Things go up and down all over the place. Does not help Trinche at all. And finally, I noticed Spike played a bum note on the second verse before resolving it. It's fine. It's okay. It's not something I'm really proud. I'm really happy to listen to all the time. I probably wouldn't choose to listen to it, but it is what it is. What can you do? All right. Next up, we got the 4-6-6-6-4 concerts. This time with Anastasia and cast. Come back for more.
I've paid my dues time after time.
All right, this is kind of a momentous moment. This was kind of like the Freddie Mercury tribute concert in a way. Queen and Dave Stewart from the Eurythmics put together this 4-6-6-6-4 concert with Nelson Mandela and to help with the AIDS pandemic, or AIDS epidemic, I should say, in Africa and throughout the world, really. And Queen had a large portion to play. Brian played a bunch. Roger played a bunch. Queen had their own set. They had a middle set, and they actually closed out the concert as well. This was the last song, so we get the whole cast coming on. It's a great moment with the cast appearing. That's what it's just like the Liza thing. It's got that big sing-along feel. The audience is feeling it. It's a great ending song. It always is. Even when you have a not so great version of it, if you're playing it in front of an audience, you're going to have a fun time, and the audience is going to have a fun time. Again, catchiest song of all time. And it's actually does stay true to herself. It feels a little more closer to what Freddie would have done instead of the more pop version we've been hearing. definitely soulful. I like this much better than her "We Will Rock You." It fits the song more. A little bit of a bluesy voice. And she only does the first verse and numerous choruses, but it is natural, unlike Live Magic. It's just how they performed it. Overall, it's a fine performance. I dig this one quite a bit. It's worth a listen. It ends up the concert very well, and the 4664 concert was a real triumph overall. So, all right, let's move on to the next portion. This is the Queen and Paul Rogers era. There are 8 of them to listen to thanks to the official downloads. So go listen to the versions there. Return of the Champions, live in Hamburg 2005, live in Cardiff 2005, super live in Japan, live in Ukraine, live in Nottingham 2008, live in Cardiff 2008, live in London 2008. Note that Cardiff 2005 actually does not have a YouTube, so you can't listen to that one, but I will talk about it, and I'll do the same thing, a little mini ranking, and we'll move on and talk about the rest.
And bad mistakes have made a few.
All right, overall, Paul Rogers actually adds a lot to the song. I think this is one of the better songs for Paul or Adam to sing. Paul definitely blueses it up a little bit more than Freddie would have. Less poppy, but more blues rocky. He does a very good version of it. And again, it's usually the climactic ending of a concert, so it has that going for it. These definitely tend to flow together a little bit, a lot of the same type of things happening. But I had some few things I'd like to point out as we go through. Let's start it off again. I'll go from least favorite of the Queen and Paul Rogers era to my favorite of the Queen and Paul Rogers era. Let's start now. Live in Nottingham, 2008. I'm not a big fan of this one. Paul lets the crowd just take the majority of the first verse, which is kind of cool in concert, but just on a recording, nah. In fact, he doesn't sing a whole lot of the whole time. He lets the audience sing quite a bit. He comes in every once in a while, helps the choir or the chorus out, things of that nature. He does sing portions of it, but overall, it's a lot more crowd oriented than Paul oriented. I don't know if Paul just had a bad night vocally. Maybe he was tired and he was saving his voice for the tour. I know he definitely had some vocal strains during the tours at times and sometimes he took songs off and let Brian and Roger sing them. Maybe it was one of those times where he was trying to save his voice. He was feeling something in his voice. That's why I let the crowd take over. And I don't blame him. That's what happens on a rock and roll tour, man. I mean, I no doubt Paul is one of the biggest legends in rock and roll history, especially vocally speaking. But as far as that goes, that makes it definitely not on my list as far as a crown jewel. So either way. All right, from there, live in Ukraine in 2008. Standard verse, standard fare. This night they only do the first verse and the choruses, which I guess it was a charity gig. It was them and Elton John performed together, but it wasn't like their usual charity festival gig. So I feel like they could have just done the whole song. So it feels a little anticlimactic without a large cast behind them. Just feels like a quick, dirty kind of version. Not bad. It's not badly done. It's just I wish we'd have the full version of it. So that's where I go there. Super live in Japan. Paul's voice actually sounded a little tired, especially at the beginning here. He gets it back towards the end of the song, but he kind of feels like he's kind of mailing it in a little bit to the beginning. The plus side, we have Roger's voice is coming in clear in the mix, which I like, of course, but not enough to add this a little higher to the list. I will note there's a kind of a really cool, slightly alternate ending. I'm not sure if it was a mistake by Brian with the chord he played, and then they went with it and made it like a slight alternate ending, or something they were trying out. But either way, mistake or not, it actually sounded kind of cool. It ended up being a nice, different alternate ending than what we had so far. So I'll go with that. Next up from that, live in London, 2008. Well, this is fine. I'm not a big fan of the vocal mix in this one. Not necessarily Paul's fault or anybody's fault, but the mix comes off a little bit muddied and inconsistent, kind of raises and lowers, and it's just fine. Nothing special about it. There is some nice extra drumming at the end. Roger gets a little bit of a couple more fills toward the end, which is different. That's why I kind of raised it above. I think it has a little bit that way. But overall, the vocal mix really kind of keeps this from being in the top notch of the Queen and Paul Rogers era. So next up, Cardiff, 2005. Again, pretty standard fare. Roger, again, a little more present in the backing vocals. I do like that. I felt like Brian and Danny Miranda, who played bass for the Queen and Paul Rogers era, are getting to feel a little more adventurous towards the end here. They started doing a little bit more, but then they kind of petered out. So overall, nothing spectacular about this one. This is the one without the YouTube link, so you're not missing a whole lot here. All in all, it's fine. Definitely some of the other ones are better, though. All right, top three. We got Return of the Champions version from Sheffield in 2005. This was the album that recorded and released the first Queen and Paul Rogers album. Paul starts it out really well. He adds a lot of his own little nicks to it. I made a few, and it kind of like goes up and down. And he adds definitely a definite difference to the song than had been done so far. But it's fine. The band's not quite as tight as it gets towards the end of this tour, but it's a good solid version. Next up, we got Hamburg 2005. I like this one a lot. Brian definitely is a little more playful during the verses. You kind of hear a little more stabbing of notes here and there. The bassist sounds a little bit higher up in the mix. Paul continues to add his bluesy vocals, and there's a great ending by him vocally, which I really kind of dug and kind of made the version for me. So Hamburg 2005 is definitely a winner for me, a winner, but not the winner. My favorite Queen and Paul Rogers version that we have so far is Alive in Cardiff in 2008. So we did have the YouTube version of it. I think Paul's a lot more playful during the second part of the song. Roger is heard a lot more during this. I really like the addition of Roger's voice. It almost feels like a duet at times, which give me Roger singing "We're the Champions" any day, and I'll take it. So this is why I think having Paul Roger duet makes this one pretty much my favorite version overall. So that's what I'm going to do, at least as far as the Queen and Paul Rogers era goes. Cardiff 2008 is my favorite version. All right, let's move on to the next version. Queen and Adam Lambert have released 2 versions of this live officially. Let's go listen to those 2 and come back for more.
I've had my share kicked in my face.
There's only 2. I'm not going to do any mini ranking. I'm just going to go right into it. Live in Japan, there was no YouTube link for it, unfortunately. I think there is YouTube links you can find, but it's not of the actual officially released song version of it. There's some audience versions of it. Adam definitely harkens back after Queen and Paul Rogers. He harkens back to more of the pop diva type thing that was going on for a bit. He had a lot of those Christina Aguilera type runs, up and down, which some people can't stand as rock and roll fans. I'm open to it more. I still feel like it's put over the top of the layered bed that Roger, Brian, and company, Neil Fairclough in this case, has laid down Spike Edney. Adam's got a very powerful voice. You cannot deny that. He has some really big, shining, killer moments in there. The back vocals seem like kind of mixed down a little bit. I don't feel as they're very strong comparatively. I like that it goes up powerfully into the second chorus and gets the crowd really involved. And the end is very theatrical. Adam really glams up the end quite a bit. He starts repeating the line. Something he does this throughout his tours. Some people absolutely hate that he milks it like this. I think it's fine. I think it's great for him. Overall, I don't know if I'd compare it to like the Freddie versions or anything like that, but definitely worth a listen to. And I saw it live. It was a lot of fun. A big climactic ending. Live Around the World was the second or the one they did from 2020, Firefight in Australia, the big concert, benefit concert there when Adam and Queen recreated the Live Aid set list, including the full version of We Are the Champions here. Strong theatrical ending here. Brian, as the years go on with Brian and Adam, Brian always feels like a little bit more playful with Adam and starts like playing along. And Adam does start doing the theatrical ending, Brian adds his guitar to it. So it becomes kind of a duet version there. It's kind of cool. It's very kind of, it doubles down a little bit on it. If you don't like that stuff, then you're not going to like it. If you do like that, you might like this one more. Yeah. So that's Queen Adam Lambert era. All right, we got 4 more to listen to. 4 more alternate versions. We'll start with Pavarotti and Friends from 2003 with Zucchero. Come back for more. Brian May often played with Pavarotti at his Pavarotti and Friends concerts. First played the first one back in 1992 where he was doing Too Much Love Will Kill You. Roger joins him for this one in 2003. One of the songs they do is We're the Champions at the end, and they have Zucchero sing with them. Now, you might not know who Zucchero is. He is an Italian rock star, rock pop star, a friend of Brian specifically. He has played with the band numerous times, including the Cape Town 46664 gigs, and many others, quite honestly. This is more of that cheap pop. Brian really milks it by trying to introduce Zucchero. The crowd is a little muted. I'm not sure if it's because of the recording or because they don't really aren't as excited about it. Because who knows who goes to a Pavarotti and Friends gig? I mean, that might be more opera fans. I don't really know. But Brian does have it. Zucchero has a strong voice, strong rock voice. But overall, it's not like anything I'd have to write home about. It's delivers well, not very pop at all, very gravelly, very rocking. The most important or most fun part of the gig for me, or this entry, I should say, Brian actually sings the first part of the second verse by himself. He actually does the lead vocal for verse and a half, which makes me wish that Brian and Roger would attempt to do something like that more. Let Brian and Roger do a whole concert. Just you guys, you can do it. But then Zucchero and him sing for the pre-chorus together. There's a lot of Brian noodling towards the end, and also there's a string section that's playing along throughout the entire track. Gets a little louder as it goes on. Adds a nice little layered section to it. All in all, not bad. Zucchero's a little generic for me as far as the rock voice goes, but overall, it's a solid entry into our Crown Jewels listing here. All right, next up, the band goes to Russia for MTV Russia Awards with another cheap pop local singer named Zemfira. Come back for more.
I paid my dues time after time.
Not much to say here. Zemfira was a Russian singer. She's still active today. She's fine. Again, more cheap pops. It's not a great recording. This is on YouTube. I don't have a very good recording of it, so that really doesn't do it justice, so it suffers there. But what I can hear, Zemfira has a really nice voice, and the best part about it is that she doesn't try to do a whole lot with it. It's a nice alternative to when they really try. A lot of people try to go for it in all these different ways with all the different kind of pop stuff. She just kind of straightforwardly puts it together. The flip side of that exact thing, though, is that she doesn't seem to have a lot of personality. I don't know what she's like with some of her other material. I've never seen her before. I've only seen her with Queen, but she's got a pretty straightforward delivery, not much to it, not very memorable, not bad, just not memorable. It does have the nice theatrical ending like Party of the Palace, so a big kind of climactic ending, even if she's not being very powerfully straightforward. So all right, that's all I got to say about that. Next up, we got two more left. Let's talk about the American Idol, where it is Queen Adam Lambert. It almost should be in the Queen Adam Lambert section, but the band weren't officially together yet at that point. This was the first time Queen got to perform with Adam Lambert. The finals of American Idol, where Adam Lambert was facing off against eventual winner Chris Allen. Take a listen to that. We'll come back. We'll talk about it. Okay, first off, I feel bad for Chris Allen a little bit here. Time has definitely not been kind to him comparatively. He won American Idol, and people didn't really understand why. He's had an okay career against adult contemporary type stuff, but he's never really had much to do. You don't really know his name very well. Adam Lambert clearly should have won this version of American Idol. But basically what happens is Adam and Chris trade off the vocal lines first. Then when the chorus comes in, Brian and Roger kind of the stage opens up and you get Brian and Roger coming on with a lot of smoke. And they play really well. Chris Allen's voice that was just overwhelmed. It's just overwhelmed by Adam and by the band for that matter. It's just not his style. It's not anything against him. He's just not a big arena rock guy. He's much more of a singer-songwriter, country-esque kind of guy. And it really, putting them up against Adam in this one is just unfair. It's unfair. Adam rocks it out. He goes for it in quite a few notes. You can tell while Brian's playing, he's really looking more at Adam Lambert going, this kid could have something. This might be something we could do. Whereas Chris, he kind of is very polite too. He's generally good too, but overall, it's fine. But it's not a great version overall because Chris just kind of is not that great a guy. I'd rather listen to Queen and Adam Lambert. I'm going to listen to one of their later on recordings when they're together and gelling as a band. But all right, one more final up. Proms in the Park, Brian May and Carrie Ellis. Check on that. Come back for more. And then we'll rank this son of a bitch. All right. All right, one of the first real gigs that Brian May played with Carrie Ellis as far as like being on a big stage. Proms in the Park is a big going on in the UK. This is in 2010. They had a couple of tracks, and one of them was We'll Rock You. And I think it might have been to give Carrie Ellis a little bit of time to change. Right after We'll Rock You, Brian goes into this little Pink Floyd like noodling, complete with a drony keyboard around him. Doesn't last for very long, but man, does it add a little bit of extra something to it. I don't even know what to call it, but I really like the atmosphere it ends up to me. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the Queen and Robbie Williams stuff, with the kind of drony like opening. But the interesting part is Carrie does come out, and for the beginning, instead of playing the intro on piano in the background, Brian actually plays it on guitar. So the piano is played on the guitar. So it's a very unique version. And as for the rest of the song goes, it's great. Carrie does it great. She's probably one of the better rock sounding Broadway type singers. She does very well with Brian overall. Again, it's that live climactic song, so it works almost no matter what you do with it. But mostly the main reason you want to listen to this is Brian. Brian's stuff really adds a little bit to it. It definitely makes it a unique version compared to all the other ones we listen to. I do like this one quite a bit. So, all righty, let's get right down to it. Not a lot of time here. We're going to go through and rank them from least favorite to crown jewel. Let's do it. Least favorite, Gulf War version. Not going to listen to George Bush pontificate over why we supposedly won the war in Iraq when I have it just no. Next up from there, the Ruined by Rick Rubin version. I do like what Rick did with We Will Rock You, at least the main one, when he added Flea and Chad Smith. That's kind of fun. That's kind of funky. I kind of dig it. This one adding the same type of idea to the We're the Champions. No, thank you. Next up from that, Amsterdam 2002. Well, not a great mix. It's a generic sounding singer. Wasn't too impressed by her. With that shitty mix, no reason to pick from it when they have so many other ones that are greater. Up from there, the MTV Awards in Russia, similar to Amsterdam 2002. Same kind of not a great mix, not a great sound. I like Zemfira's more minimalist approach to it. It works for me more than Trinchay's did, so I probably put it just above. End of the day, though, I'm not going to listen to it very many times. Next up from there, Part of the Palace 2002. I like the We'll Rock You backing actors. I like the dramatic ending. Not a big fan of Will Young and won't ever be a fan of Will Young. In fact, these last three in a row could pretty much be interchanged and that'd be fine. Next up from that, Live in Nottingham 2008, Queen and Paul Rogers. I talked about Paul saving his voice, I guess. Skipping that one. This is where I put Live Magic. Again, would be a lot higher on the list if it wasn't for the fact that it got edited down. In fact, I may afterwards come back and say this should be a lot higher on the list because it is Freddie's last version, right? Why? How can you put it so low? I don't know. I just want a full version for a crown jewel. All right, from there, Queen Robbie Williams video version. You know what? I'm going to change that right now. I'm just going to do it. I'm making it all a switch up. I'm moving the Queen Robbie video version down here and Live Magic up there. Actually going to move Live Magic above American Idol as well. Look at that. We're doing this live. This is what happens when I start recording these things live. I'm not going to edit it out. You're hearing my decisions making as I go. I'm going to put the Queen Robbie Williams video version down here right after Queen and Paul Rogers Nottingham. Up from there, the American Idol. Too much Chris Allen for me. Live Magic from there, even though it has the edited versions. Okay. Back on track. Let's do it. Pavarotti and Friends, 2003 here. Zucchero, a little generic for me. I prefer Paul Rogers' versions. I prefer Adam Lambert's version overall. I do like Brian going live, though, for a couple of verses there, a couple of lines in the verse, rather, but not enough to keep it from sinking this far down. Next up from that, Live in the Ukraine, 2008. Fine version, again, edited down, or not edited down, played shortly, but a little less climatically than, say, the next one, the 4664 version. I probably like Paul Rogers better than Anastasia, but this had a bigger, momentous feel. It felt like it was a big charity get together. We had a lot of people on stage together. Anastasia had a good time. Bay had a good time. I thought. From here, Super Live in Japan, Queen and Paul Rogers here. Again, this is the time where they started being a little more playful of things. The band had started gelling a little bit. But compared to a lot of the Paul Roger era, pretty typical. All right, Top of the Pops from here. It's not a bad version. It just seems like if I'm going to play the version, I'd rather listen to the album version. This is a alternate take for guitar, and it's not the greatest. Definitely good as a curio, but as far as the crown jewel goes, it's down the list. Same from there, the backing track mix, same basic thing. I don't want to hear this comparatively to the main. If I'm going to listen to this, I'm going to listen to the main version. I want the vocals. I want somebody singing. And yet it's so high up here, right? Because the band sounds so good together. I'm being a little bit hypocritical having this be this high, to be completely honest. From there, the Freddie Mercury tribute concert. Again, the momentousness of the occasion overwhelms any negatives about the singing and the warbling, I should say. Again, nothing against Eliza, just the styles don't mesh quite as well. From here, London 2008, Cardiff 2005, Queen and Paul Rogers, same area there. Live Around the World, the firefight with Queen and Adam Lambert, above some Paul Rogers versions, below some others. From there, Return of the Champions. Band has they did a very good job. They gel better on the tour later on, but this version is one of the ones they did pretty well in Sheffield. Maybe because Queen and Paul Rogers actually played it together. in 2004 when they were first starting to get together. So that might be something to do with it there. Up there from there, Live in Japan from Queen and Adam Lambert, the better of the two Adam Lambert versions. I feel like they really kind of hit it together, hit a home run with that. But again, not compared to the Freddie versions and some of the Paul Rodgers versions, not quite as much. This is where I put Live Killers. Again, it's more about the I feel like it's overdubbed too much. I don't want to listen to it. So that kind of like ruins it for me as far as trying to make it any kind of crown jewel. I'm listening to Live Killers. I'm not going to skip it. I'll even put it on sometime because it's fun to sing along to. It's a very good Freddie vocal, but I can't reward it for having so many obvious overdubs. So Queen and Paul Rodgers, Hamburg, 2005. Again, I like this with the playfulness of it. A great ending by Paul. Again, the bass is a little bit better. Just a better version. From there, Live Aid. I don't have much to say about it. It's a good version. There's comparatively some other I've higher. This is where I put Proms in the Park. That's where I have the next one, the Proms in the Park. That Brian thing in the beginning, it's so small and so almost inconsequential, and yet it's also so different and alternative. I do have to watch myself sometimes because sometimes, like the album version gets played so many times, hearing something different can boost it up, whether it's actually better or not, the best version or not. In this case, it's still far away from the top, so it's not going to be risky for Crown Jewel. So I'd probably rather listen to that than some of the other versions. So I like that version. I like the beginning section a lot, and Brian playing the piano on the guitar. From there, Live at Wembley, Day 1, then Hungarian Rhapsody. He's going to slide through. This is where I put the Queen Robbie Williams era stuff outside of the video. Video version down to the dumps because, quite frankly, like I said, the inserted lines, whatever. If I'm going to listen to the Queen and Robbie version, I'm going to listen to one of the main versions. And I said that without even meaning to, but that's it. I would pick the main version over the soundtrack version. So that's where we have in that order, soundtrack version less, then the main version. I do love that new solo at the end that actually puts it up higher for me. It's not even just an alternative thing. It's just the fact that I think it adds to the song. And I do love the strings on the main version, which are much more louder. A lot of texture going on. I like the spacey keyboard intro. I wish I had a Freddie version of this because I like the arrangement quite a bit. All right, getting down towards the nitty gritty towards the end there. Cardiff 2008, my favorite Queen and Paul Rodgers era. As I mentioned, this is where it slides through. We are down now to On Fire at the Bowl. And now we're at the top 4. Rock Montreal. These are the two I said, On Fire Montreal. On Fire at the Bowl and Rock Montreal are pretty much equal with each other as far as Crown Jewels goes. I could listen to either one of them and be happy about it. So there we go. We got the final 3, the top 3. They are, drum roll, please. At number 3, the album version. That's right. It's not going to be the album version today. It's not the one we're going to listen to. Although it is it is close. It is one of my favorite versions of all time. It's the old standby. You can't go wrong with it. Especially with the alternate or the unresolved ending. I do love that, whether the Mandela effect works at all or not. But at the end of the day, there's still 2 left. There's two left. Which one goes on the top? We have the Raw Sessions version or Live at Wembley Day 2. And I'm going to go with at number 2, Live at Wembley Day number 2. I almost put this as number 1. I went back and forth in my head a lot. This has a lot of nostalgia for me. One of the first concert versions I ever had. I like how it builds. I like Freddie's voice building. At the end of the day, I love that Raw Sessions version because it is as close as I can get to the Queen and Robbie version. It's that same similar kind of arrangement. We do have some extra guitar work, Brian working overtime, and the vocals are pretty close to what we got. Still has the unresolved ending. I like that. At the end of the day, this just feels like the better version. I think if I had a true pick, I would probably make some kind of hybrid between the album version and the Raw Sessions version. But if I have to pick one that is my favorite version, the Crown Jewel, it's going to be the Raw Sessions version. There you go. All righty, what's left to do? Well, we got to rank this bad boy on a scale of 1 to 11. Because we always turn things up to 11 here on PLD Projects. I'm going to give We're the Champions a solid 10. It's kind of funny if it was just the song without being how much of a live ending or how much a climactic concert finale it has become over the years and as part of the zeitgeist as far as in stadiums, et cetera, et cetera. I'd probably push it lower. I'd probably have it down a little bit lower. But there's something magical about the song. Again, catchiest song of all time. I'll say it again. But there's something magical about seeing the guys in concert, even though I chose the Raw session as my crown jewel. Seeing the guys in concert and just feeling the crowd, loving the band, loving each other, loving just the music, the energy of the time. It's a great sing along. It's something magically said about that. So I can't deny that. So whereas the song itself, maybe I would have gotten a little bit less because of everything else surrounding it. I'm going to slide up to a 10. It still doesn't make my top 10 Queen songs or Queen related songs of all time, because they're all 10.5 and higher already. I know I'm a little bit of a shill. I have mostly higher rankings for all the songs. It is what it is, like it or not. But that's going to be doing it for us this week. Thanks for checking out again, too, for a second week in a row, or second episode in a row, I should say. It took me 2 weeks to do both episodes. We should actually return to a more manageable track listing for the rest of the album. Next up, we got Sheer Heart Attack, a Roger Taylor written song. A few live versions, a few alternative versions to tackle, but not nearly the size of these past two. A very interesting punk rock song. Yes, Sheer Heart Attack, not on the Sheer Heart Attack album. That's how long the song was in development for. So that's what we're doing. That's next time here. If this is your first time here, click that like, click that subscribe. If you're on the YouTube, click over to my sister channel, my main PLD Projects channel. You can click subscribe there as well. That'll help me out. Getting close to 500. I know it's not a lot to some people, not a lot to anybody really, but it's a lot for me. I'm happy for it. If you want to help out even further, PLD Project has a Patreon, patreon.com/PLD Projects. Such stalwart gentlemen as Austin Cadell, Jeremiah Morris, Matthew Kearns, Brandon Buckingham, Jeff Alterman. Could not do it without you guys, or could not keep the lights on, really. So I appreciate you and everyone else as well. I have some great things going on there. The Harris dance, where I'm going through the entire IMDb catalog of Ed Harris, my favorite character actor of all time. We have some Patreon hangouts to do, additional content. Please hang out there. It's a lot of fun for everybody there. Facebook message group is pretty active all the time, talking about everything from wrestling to Queen to Doctor Who, to movies, anything you want to talk about, really. It's a lot of fun, though. So thank you so much. We will be back, like I said, this time it should be next week. Get back to a weekly schedule. I hate having to skip things. We will probably take a break, one more break during December, during the holidays, potentially. But I'll let you know about that. That's it, though, guys. Until then, keep yourself alive. And as always, God save the Queen. We are the champions of the world, my friend.